Welcome back to Michiana Main Lines. Today we're going to be looking at the Conrail's Niles, Michigan French paper spur. This was a spur that ran off of the South Bend to Niles line. So let's get started. We'll take a little more of a bigger overview this time of the northern Indiana and southern Michigan area, just to kind of give those a little bit of a look that aren't too familiar with the Michiana region. Basically, we have South Bend here, and Niles was just north of it. The Niles South Bend line is shown right here. And of course, we have the east-west main Norfolk Southern now through South Bend, and we have the Amtrak line which goes through Niles and Dowagiac and New Buffalo. Here's a closer look at the Niles area and the South Bend Secondary, which ran from Niles. The South Bend Secondary actually consisted of many parts. The main part we're going to be looking at today is just south of Niles in this area, and that is where the French paper spur, which you kind of see here in blue, branched off of the line. And also at one time you had the Benton Harbor Niles Secondary, which is this line here, which ran up to Benton Harbor. And also at one time that came all the way south eastward to Granger and Elkhart. Here's a closer look at the Niles area, and we kind of see here what was called the Niles Junction. This is where the Benton Harbor to Elkhart line came through back in the day. And here we see the French paper spur or French lead, and of course the Niles to South Bend line. Here's a look at kind of what that area looks like today. This would be the Niles Junction area. You still see the scars very well here of the French paper lead, which came up northwest through here. It's kind of hard to tell, but the Benton Harbor Secondary, that also ran very close to it. In fact, branched off from it in the later years. And back through here is where the line went out to Elkhart and Granger. Now, we'll kind of look at this area here, how it was way back when all the lines were here, and it was vastly different from even the later years when Conrail still operated it. Here's what that looked like. This was from the M.D. McCarter collection, and boy, that was really one heck of a junction. What you're looking at here in this photo, down at the bottom, this was the Benton Secondary, or the Big Four Railroad as it was called back at that time. In the middle here was the Niles to South Bend line, and up at the top was the Northern Indiana Railroad, which went over everything. That ran almost parallel to the Niles to South Bend on the east side. Now we're going to kind of zero in on the French paper spur and how it related to the Niles to South Bend. This is kind of looking at Niles Junction roughly in here, how it was during Conrail in the 80s and into the 90s. This was the South Bend to Niles line out of Niles, or the Niles Industrial Track, as Conrail sometimes called it. But here we see the French paper lead. Also, this dry creek that crossed here. We'll see some pictures of that because it's so close in the vicinity. And you see here two tracks. That was a passing siding that was utilized when they worked French. And the track then ended around Highway 12 here, which we'll see. This Niles paper spur was one of the last parts of the entire line to be operated. The north part of it that existed well into the 90s and almost just about to 2000. And also the very southern portion in South Bend to reach Notre Dame. Those were the two segments that were operated the last. Much of the South Bend to Niles disappeared in the middle 80s. Now we'll look at another map kind of that same area there, but this is off of a Conrail track chart. So this gets a little confusing, but it shows the main things. Here would be what was kind of the Niles Junction area. It shows the French lead. It shows the Benton Secondary kind of branching off from it, because that was one of the questions in the later years. Did it actually come off of the Niles Industrial, or did it come off of the French paper? Well, they show it coming off of the French paper, but it really paralleled quite a bit in the areas we're looking at. We'll see that later, because these maps aren't really to scale. But you see the French paper lead going to French paper, also the Michigan mushroom, which we're going to look at. That was a spur off of it, as well as Niles Chemical, which came off of it. But these maps here really aren't properly showing how things were laid out. We'll see that though. And here also was the passing sighting. Here's looking at the French lead and the way it looked during operation in the 80s. This would be looking north towards Niles, and this is how the lead branched off. Of course, at this time, the Benton Secondary was long gone, so, and that wouldn't have been in this shot anyway. That would have been up somewhere in here. But this is that bridge over the Dry Creek and what it looked like. This too would have been looking up towards the north. This is looking towards the south and kind of where the track ended. That would have been Highway 12, somewhere in that area, and the track was all gone beyond that point. Some extra rail laying here. Here's a good look at that passing sighting and what it looked like. And then we go back to this overview map here just to kind of look at the way this track kind of ran up towards the northwest and headed toward the 3rd Street and 4th Street area, which we'll be looking at very closely here. Businesses that were on the French lead back in the late 80s anyway. Of course, French Paper Company, the former Benton Secondary, we'll see Michigan Mushroom, there was a stub track, and Niles Chemical. And here's the map that would show all of these. Now, again, this is not really to scale, but here we see 3rd Street and 4th Street. This would be looking southeast off of 3rd. This was the Michigan Mushroom with its sighting, which we will see. They showed a Michigan a Benton Secondary here, but this isn't how it ran through. It would have came right through this intersection almost, which we'll see. Then we had the stub track on the other side of 4th Street, the Niles Chemical Paint, and then the lead crossed the St. Joe River near the dam and went to the French Paper. But we'll kind of zoom in on this 4th and 3rd Street area here and look at a bunch of pictures and even some video. First, here's a topo map, which kind of gives another look a little closely better to what it actually looked like. Here's the 4th and 3rd Street area. You see here the French paper spur and how close it ran to the Benton Secondary. This map doesn't show where it actually branched off, but they ran very closely together right through the intersection with the Benton Secondary almost right through the center of it. And this now is bike trail in here, right in through the Niles proper. But here's the French lead where it crossed Bond Street and then the bridge, which is no longer there, but there was a bridge near the dam, and that went into the French paper mill. So let's look a little bit at this closer still here with the overhead shot. Again, 4th Street, 3rd Street, and this is the scar showing very well. The French lead ran right through here. The mushroom plant would have been right in this area. Of course, Niles Chemical Paint is all of this here. And what they called the stub, that crossed 4th Street and came into this complex at one time. I believe there was businesses in here that were served. but in the later years it was primarily French. Here we see very well the bike trail now, which this is the grade of the Benton Secondary, which came right through here on this side of the intersection. So here looking southeast on 3rd Street, this is what the track looked like in the 80s. You can see this switch here that went to what was the Michigan Mushroom at one time. You can even see the switch stand. And look in that same direction, there's the Conrail local backing towards the French paper mill to deliver a boxcar and pick up some empties. WDKZ1 was the symbol of the Conrail local. Looking the other direction here now, basically from the same spot, here you see 4th Street, and you can see these two switches, a left and a right. The farthest one went into the Niles chemical paint. This was what they called the stub that crossed Fort and came into other businesses in this area. Here's a good shot of the WDKZ1 returning from French paper at that same location. This is a good David Corkhouse photo from the late 70s, very early 80s time period of Penn Central operating still the Benton Secondary, and this was approaching 4th and 3rd Street. You can see how this was kind of in a low area, really, the Benton Secondary, where it came through the intersection. This is looking the other way. Of course, this now is the bike trail which heads through the downtown Niles area. So now let's take a look at some video of that. Again, David Corkhouse video, same location, 4th and 3rd Street. You'll get a brief glimpse over to the right of a crossing signal. It was kind of strange because I think there was really only one. Yeah, there it is. You get a brief look at that. There was only one signal there, as I recall, and that pretty much protected the French lead, which was to the right. And then there was a bell that protected this Benton Secondary. And we're looking at it one more time, but we don't really need to do that. Here's looking towards French paper, and Niles Chemical was over to the left. This again was WDKZ1. I just love this track where it's almost invisible. Poor condition, but yet still used. There's just something so neat about that. So let's take a look at that. So looking at that intersection now and how things are so different with everything gone, the French lead came through this area. Here's that kind of low area where the Benton Secondary ran through. Any younger persons now that aren't rail fans would have no clue that there ever was a railroad or two tracks even in this location. Looking the other side, you can see the bike trail now, which is the old grade of the Benton Secondary, and back in here would have been the French paper spur. with Niles Chemical in the background. So we proceed, continuing northwestward on the French lead. It went through kind of a swamp area here, then would eventually cross Bond Street, and then the bridge, which is gone now, and then into the French paper mill complex. Kind of remember this big area here, which is now a dog park and kind of a general park, because we'll kind of be surprised what was there way back when. Here's a look at that bridge crossing the St. Joe River. That would be a French paper mill back in there. Bond Street would be somewhere in here. Another shot looking from another direction. French paper tower in the rear, and the WDKZ-1 either just leaving or just preparing to enter the property. There was a chain link gate that they had to open and close and unlock to get into the paper complex. WDKZ-1, you might be wondering what that means. Conrail had a very kind of a cool way of symboling their trains, and for locals, the W would signify away freight. Sometimes they would use the Y for yard prefix. The D stood for Dearborn Division, which was the division that they were operating in, and the KZ stood for Kalamazoo, which is where this local was based out of. The one could have indicated that there was more than one local that was based out of Kalamazoo at that time. So now here we look at an old video again, this time from David Corkhouse of the Penn Central era. Same bridge, the water tower there in the background, and again, pretty self-explanatory. Really good that this old stuff has been preserved. Again, that bridge is gone now. So this is Bond Street or Bond Avenue. Looking at what it looks like now, you can still kind of see a little bit of the grade, and the river would be in the background, but no trace of anything now. Looking at a detail map here of French paper, you can see there was many sidings in that complex. They received a lot of different type of cars. I know they even received coal at one time, but in the final years it seemed to be mostly box cars that were the car of choice at that time. Looking at an overhead of their complex, that bridge was somewhere back in here and came into the complex, and you can faintly see here some embedded track. We'll get a closer look at that. Here's a zoom in, and you can clearly see some embedded track here still going into the complex. Here's a really good view of some trackage. Here's an old Sanborn map. I believe this was from like 1900, and this shows the French paper mill area with most of that trackage in there. Quite a few spurs and stuff. It was a pretty large complex, but the surprise to me was this here on the other side. Remember, we looked at that big open area in Dog Park. That's this area back in here, and there was also another paper mill. This was the Niles Board and Paper Company, and quite a bit of track came in here, which must have branched off of the French spur, I'm assuming. But this thing it was gone for a long time. It didn't last nearly as long as French is still there. And here we see from the St. Joseph Evening Herald a paper clipping. If we zoom in, this was when they were talking about wrecking part of what was left of the Niles Board and Paper Company, and this was like in 1917. So already then it was out of business and being dismantled. Another look at both of those plants, kind of a zoom in on the north side. French here with its spurs, and here was the Niles board and paper with its spurs. So since we're so close to the Benton Secondary, we're going to kind of look a little bit at that in the Niles area, because we have some good pictures and even video, some very good video, which is pretty cool. So the Benton Secondary, what you saw is the bike trail now. As it went northwestward, it came through a area here to the left of Front Street, where there was where there's a park now, but there was a cement plant here at that time. It also showed a spur that crossed Eagle Street, and all these tracks you see here, that's what's now the Amtrak line, ex-New York Central, that has the big bridge that comes over the St. Joe River and across Front Street. And this secondary ran under that bridge and then went into up towards Benton Harbor. South of here, which you don't see on this map, it crossed Main Street, and we're going to see some video of a train crossing there. But first, here's a good picture of the Front Street area right under the bridge. This picture was taken from the bridge, and this was a train heading southbound that was coming back from Benton Harbor. And this is a good view of the cement plant there to the right. This is all park now. Well, this is what it looks like now. This is Front Street today. That's all just open park. Some businesses farther down the line, but that track kind of ran right in through here somewhere is where that track used to be. Again, no trace of it now for anybody that doesn't know better. Looking the other direction, that's the other side of Front Street. Train coming back from Benton Harbor. Great shot there, another Jeff Stromback from 1976. And once again, looking at that area now, here's just about where that track came through, and you'd never know it. Now we have that video. This was actually taken off of the Caboose by David Corkhouse. And what you're going to see kind of in quick order here will be the train running just on some track like here, and then it will cross Main Street. You'll see the Salvation Army building, and you'll also see the train going through the cement plant. It's a little bit shaky, but you can get the message. Main Street, Niles, the Salvation Army building, the cement plant to the right of Front Street. So just looking at here, we'll do a little before and after. That's that Salvation Army on Main Street, and that's what that track looked like back at that time, most likely late 70s or so. That's what that area looks like right now. No sign of any kind of a track, or even those buildings are gone since urban renewal. So I figure that track probably came through here someplace, somewhere in this area. Those buildings must have been shoehorned in right here, but I mean, just again, stark difference. If you didn't know any better, you would not have any clue that there was ever a railroad that came through here. So thanks to David Corkhouse and Jeff Stromback for video and pics, also Dan Lewecki and Mike Delatorre for some of the ZTS maps that we used. Thanks for watching, and check out our many other videos, many others on this Niles area. If you really liked seeing these old Niles, there's more Conrail video of that area and more history, as well as the South Bend Secondary between South Bend and Niles. We're going to have a lot more coming as we get more different pictures and different video that we haven't shown yet. We'll be putting that up here. In fact, we're really thrilled to have permission to use David Corkhouse's presentation. we're going to probably put that on here in 2 to 3 segments, because he does a very good over an hour presentation. And that is, if you like the Niles to South Bend, you're really going to love that. So be sure to watch for that. That should be upcoming here shortly, part 1 at least. So that's just great stuff. So again, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you soon.